Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the third and final day of our MIPIM in London live podcast sessions. We've got a really exciting one coming up, People and Skills Driving the Change. And as has become the new normal, we have some people here in the studio with us, and we have some people dialing in on video. Yesterday, we had a Professor Kelly moment where someone's toddler wandered in mid-video, so anything can happen when it's live and people are working from home. So I'll introduce our panelists. I was saying it feels less like more of a chat than a panel, given the setup. So joining me in the studio, we have Kelly Bream, COO of Nirvana Property Group, and Jules Pipe, Deputy Mayor of the Greater London Authority. Thank you both very much for being here. And then on the video joining us today, we have Gillian Halpenny, Director of Strategy and External Affairs for the BPF. We have Caroline Hill, Group Corporate Affairs and Sustainability Director at Landsec, and we have Jonathan Branton, Partner, Head of Public Sector and Head of EU Competition at DWF. Thank you very much, all of you, for being here. Going to our video callers just briefly first, I've been really enjoying the array of backgrounds that we've had through people phoning in on video. We had a view of Westchester County yesterday out of the window, and we had a view of the Italian countryside, and I'm particularly impressed by Caroline, you've got an excellent, is it a mirror or some kind of art installation behind you?
It's a large it's a large mirror. I've been trying to find the most plain spot in the house, and I clearly haven't succeeded yet.
I think it's brilliant. Thank you very much. So we're going to get into talking about the discussion at hand today pretty quickly, looking at rebalancing the UK, not just being about economics, but ensuring that everyone has appropriate skills to drive growth and what we need from government and industry. And we have the perfect people here to discuss that today. We talked a lot about coronavirus yesterday, and I want to spend less time talking about that today because we're here to talk about the subject in hand. But just before we do, a very quick round the rooms. How's everybody feeling today? It's a new day and looking like there'll be more announcements. Let's start with you, Jules.
Well, obviously, the most important thing to think of about this is that, the human dimension of this. It's, as I said the other night to a gathering at the NLA, we've got to think of this as the human dimension, and the fact this is about protecting people's well-being, not just their health but also their mental health as well. We don't know how big this will get. Looking at other countries, obviously there's a particular trajectory that we might follow. But both the government, both the GLA, both local government in this country have been preparing, and I think we shouldn't be complacent, but at the same time we shouldn't panic.
Thank you very much. Kelly, what are your thoughts?
Certainly been an interesting week, but as Jill says, a lot of it is about just being prepared, and fortunately we can do so much of our work digitally and from home now, so it's just making sure that our people have the ability to call in and still have that human interaction. Otherwise isolation can be quite tough, I would say, mentally.
Thank you. And moving on to the people who are phoning in on video, Jonathan, what are your thoughts?
Well, I'd echo what's already been said, that obviously the most important thing here is protection of people, and our business is our people. So we're very clear that trumps every other consideration. But having said that, we're clearly taking each day as it comes. We're seeing what's happening, and we're trying to call a few things early, particularly in terms of cancellation of events and gatherings of large numbers of people and travel. And otherwise, we are obviously making the best use of our investments in technology that we've made over the years, precisely to facilitate people being able to function independently in different places. So that was, of course, not based on any expectation of this happening, but it is interesting to see just how effective functioning can be when out of the office at present, and it's really putting a lot of businesses, I think, through a test on that. And who knows what the longer term impact will be, when the lessons are learned about how people were able to function during this particular crisis, changes in the future. We'll see.
Thank you very much. Ghislaine, what are your thoughts?
I mean, largely to echo what others have said, I suppose, and it's very much a take it day by day. We're in a similar around events and what we can and can't do over the next few weeks and months, and whether it's responsible to bring large numbers of people together is also kind of playing on our minds. As for tech, we are slowly but surely getting there, and I think that we will continue to stand, although it's not the easiest of things. And with 2 small children, I would just really like to not be incarcerated for too long with them at home, really at all.
Thank you very much. I particularly like that, as you said, that with the tech we're getting there, you had a slight delay on your line. You can always trust the tech to do that just at the wrong moment. And Caroline, finally, what are your thoughts? And then we'll move on to talk about the topic at hand.
Just to echo what everyone else has said, I think the really interesting takeaway is going to be whether in the long term, once this crisis is over, whether it changes for some organisations the way people work. And I think that's the kind of nice link to the topic we're talking about. But providing flexibility in work is really important for so many people now. And so I think the one positive of this situation is I do think it's going to lead to a long-term difference in the way people work.
Thank you very much. And you made a good point there, which is that it links quite nicely. We've been talking about what's going on at the moment and the impact it's having on people, which is, one of the it's the first word in this subject. The people, the effect it's having on their mental health, the effect that isolation might have, and all that stuff is going to test industries across the country and across the world, and real estate will be no exception. And that sort of brings us quite neatly onto the first question that we wanted to go into, which is that real estate has historically not always been able to attract the most diverse talent, and that has been a problem that it is desperately trying to address. And I just wondered, is it changing fast enough, and what more can be done to address these issues? And I think the idea of making working more easily flexible does really play into that as well. So can we start with you on that, Kelly?
Yes, of course. No, I think, as you say, it hasn't been particularly fast to, change, and, working practices and, people's lifestyles is becoming a huge part. And I think it's not, there's a huge amount to be done about, bringing gender and equality there. But there's also, priority and looking at, across a number of things, whether it's age and background and skill sets. And adjusting the typical, I guess, working dynamics of property, and it's not so much around presenteeism and being in the office 9 till 5, and actually understanding that people have more of a wanting more of a flexible work-life balance, and adjusting to those and working from home, and that's certainly going to be a huge part that we need to adjust to as we move forward.
Thanks very much, Jules. Same question to you.
We are up 50 years behind where we probably ought to be today, certainly in terms of diversity. I agree, we've been woefully slow. I think to get people up at the highest levels within the sector, we need to make sure that all levels below that actually have good routes in for a diverse range of people, so that there is a pool from which to draw from. If we take the construction side of the industry, we're doing a lot of that at work on that at City Hall through the Mayor's Construction Academy, and already in just a year we've seen a huge step change in the numbers of women and the numbers of BME people coming into, and learners coming into the construction industry. Just in the first 7 months, we had more than 700 BAME Londoners find jobs in the construction industry, and the baseline figure that we're comparing to was just over 400. And with women finding jobs in the construction sector, almost 400 over the period, compared to just 94 in the comparative period the year before. So actually, the Construction Academy, which is sort of a coordination function really, and bringing together the skills providers and construction firms and connecting them with people looking to come into the industry. That's just one thing that we've done that's having an impact. But then there's a whole piece as well that I can talk about perhaps later on about the consultancies as well, and the fact that the makeup of the consultancy is obviously overwhelmingly white, overwhelmingly male, older. And similarly in the infrastructure sector as well, right across the piece, we've, there's work to do, and at City Hall we're trying to do elements of work across the whole piece.
Well, thank you very much. And Gillian, I'm interested in coming to you on those sort of final points that Jules made around consultancies and the makeup of the majority of those companies. What are your thoughts on that, and what more can be done to bring more diversity in right from the get-go?
I think it's really interesting, and it's in a sense we're in a very different place now to where we were a year ago, with a government with a much stronger mandate and a will to kind of get things done, as we keep hearing. It's an ideal opportunity for the sector to work hand in hand in the government and share some of those challenges and opportunities. So you could see a world where in 12 months' time we have a shared objective of a 50-50 split between men and women within the sector, and government also puts its weight behind that to try and get us there. In the meantime, there are a lot of initiatives within the sector out there. There's real estate balance, BAME and property, freehold, to Purple, to name but a few, all of whom we work with to try and use our convening powers to BPF to bring them together. And then there are all the initiatives by the various individual firms. One of the challenges is that there are so many that there's a job there to sort of map them out and make sure that there aren't any gaps. But individual firms, and I'm sure Caroline can talk about this, coming on in leaps and bounds.
Thank you very much. That's a very nice segue. Thank you very much. So I'll come to you next, Caroline. What are your thoughts on that from your position and from a position within Landsec?
This is a real priority for Landsec, and it's really important. It's the right thing to do, but it's also commercially the right thing to do, that our workforce reflects the profile of the communities where our assets are. And so that we're truly diverse and understand the environments and where we have our buildings and our places. Landsec set last year some really ambitious targets on diversity, 50% female representation across the business at all grades, and 14% BAME representation. And there's a lot of work to do to hit those challenging targets. And I think it's something that the industry really needs to pull together on to achieve. One practical step we've recently taken at Landsec is to review our shared parental leave policies, and so now we've extended those to be 6 months for both men, women, anyone in our workforce that's entitled to parental leave. It's now 6 months. So I think looking at the small changes we can make will start to shift the dial, but there's a long way to go.
Thank you very much. And Jonathan, your thoughts on this issue particularly?
Thanks. Well, I suppose I should say at first we're advisors to the real estate sector rather than being in it ourselves in that sense. But the issues are very common, I suppose, and particularly people won't be surprised to hear that the legal sector has had many accusations of being not as diverse as it should be, and we're certainly of the view that we have to deal with this. We have to improve our diversity all the time. We've got an awful lot going on in our business to do precisely that. We certainly think that it makes for much better advisors to have the most rounded and rounded set of skills, of views, of experience and awareness in order to be able to best serve our clients. So we've done a lot in this area, certainly introduced a wide range of targets. But on the broader level, we think it's clearly, as a lot of people have said, it's not something you can do overnight. And you've got to put steps in place to achieve these things over time. We think it especially starts, with young people. And we do, for example, outreach programs into schools, particularly in disadvantaged areas, in order precisely to open eyes of children to the possibilities of pursuing a career in sectors that they might not have thought were open to them. And we think that building from really that level upwards is how to change things really positively for the future.
Thank you very much. I'm going to come on in a minute to talk about how improving skills will increase the productivity of the UK as a whole, and how we can practically improve skills and what's needed. But before we do that, I'm actually going to skip to one of the last questions first. Sorry, because we've talked a lot about diversity there. But one of the things that you mentioned, Jonathan, was looking at young people. And this doesn't just apply to young people, but I wanted to talk to you all about the need to change skills and new skills and the types of roles that are evolving because of the changing nature of the world we live in and the industry. I mean, specifically, looking at skills around technology. I mean, that's not the only area, of course, but that is a big area of growth. And there are roles out there that need filling with people who'll have new skills. So how well is the industry doing there? And where can we look to find the right people to fill those jobs? They're going to be so crucial going forwards. That was an Emily special. That was about 5 questions in one. But Jules, if we could come to you first on changing those skills, upskilling people who are already in roles so that it's more relevant going forward for digital transformation. What are your thoughts on that, and how are we doing?
Well, at City Hall, there's a number of schemes that we've brought forward to both in the digital sphere, but also in regards to construction as well. There's a large £7 million programme that we've got to skill up people on the digital side. And in construction, obviously, we're keen on people bringing forward ideas about modern methods of construction. We need to get building faster, particularly in the build-to-rent sector, which would really lend itself to this. So again, we're encouraging that, talking to industry about how we can accelerate that. Thank you very much. Same question to you, Kelly.
Well, I guess property is not, digitally born, so it naturally doesn't attract, the younger, more native, savvy, users of technology. So we definitely need to be looking at how we can drive, that sort of skill set and talent into the industry. We talk a lot about customer experience, and perhaps we need to also be looking at employee experience, because there are a number of age demographics, and some that are, more au fait with technology. But it is a different language. And actually what you end up having is, a discommunication between different parties. And so there perhaps needs to be a bit of a review of, the systems that we're bringing in. And, the upskilling piece, I think, is huge. And maybe stepping away from, we've all been there, and, you log onto a platform and you read about, some new digital tech words that are out, and that's your training done. But perhaps something that's a little bit more hands-on. In the same way we reinvest in property, we need to be reinvesting people continuously, because technology is constantly evolving.
Thank you very much. Caroline, what are your thoughts on that, and how is this being addressed at Landsec? I mean, I know that there are things in place there, and I'd be interested to hear a bit more about that.
Sure. So I think to echo some of the earlier points, in particular, modern methods of construction, I think is going to be huge for our sector, and that's something we're looking at very heavily at the moment. So how can we create a lot of our work off-site? How can we use BIM, building information modelling technology, more actively? And in terms of how it will reduce productivity, is upskilling people, but it's also going to lead to significant reductions in waste and carbon. So it's a win-win from several perspectives. So there's large-scale initiatives like that going on at Landsec, but also I think in terms of looking at our existing workforce, we've got something that we've recently started. It's a program called Circle, and it's a reverse mentoring scheme. So we're working with some local school children in Westminster, and actually they're the ones mentoring our people. And we've had a couple of sessions. They've been really interesting. But one of the things that's coming up quite regularly is the younger people mentoring some of our workforce on digital skills. And to the point that Kelly made about, trying different ways of educating people, so it's not just a sort of online training program, actually getting people in that are really tech savvy, young people just get this sort of stuff, getting them in, talking to our people has been really really interesting and really fun way for people to learn new skills.
Thank you very much. And Gillian, I know that the BPF has done a lot of work around digital transformation and preparing the industry for this. Where do the skills issues lie for you guys when you're looking into this, and what are your thoughts?
I suppose there are 2 points here. The one is, and the thing that none of us have quite grappled yet here, immigration and where we are in a world of Brexit and what that looks like. We were delighted to join the CBI and a range of other organisations in a letter to the Home Secretary a few weeks ago to offer our support for the new system. But there's a long way to go, and construction is cyclical. There are many challenges there, and it needs to be taken seriously. At the same time, we can hang on. Sorry, something very odd is happening.
That's right. We can still hear you. So
there we go.
Hello.
At the same time, we have to not just rely on that and grow our own at home as well. And then at a more domestic level, again, we have BPF Futures, which is our junior network of young professionals. We're recently delighted to welcome Homes England into that as well, and are beginning to sort of extend its tentacles into the public sector more broadly. And the shared learning that we can get from that, the learning between the public and private sector is great. And we're only really beginning to tap into what that looks like in practice. And there's some great new things coming forward with that.
Thank you very much. I quite enjoyed the phrase "extend its tentacles." That was good. Thank you for that. That painted a picture. So, Jonathan, what are your thoughts on this and the need for upskilling? And I think that I know that you were saying that you weren't strictly within the real estate sector before, but this is something which sort of it impacts everybody and everything, doesn't it? Every element of it, whether you're advising or consulting or whatever it might be. And I'm interested to hear what your thoughts are.
Well, yeah, very much so. I mean, the first thing to note is that obviously it's great to hear that companies in the sector are investing in the skills of their existing workforces and, adult upskilling already. And that's great. I think the big challenge arises, though, in that, and we find this because we advise a lot on public funding and public funding programs, is that training programs for upskilling of adults, employees rather, are very expensive. Now, first of all, you've got all the costs of the materials, the trainers, the facilities, all of those sorts of things. But most importantly of all, you've got the downtime from the day job of the employees. And that's why companies have to think twice before investing in particularly expensive and far-reaching upskilling programs. So whilst obviously it's great that happens naturally anyway in a lot of places, it obviously doesn't happen enough. And when something doesn't happen naturally, then it's because there's a viability gap or a viability perception that it's too expensive for us to down tools for a moment to go off and do all of this. And that's where if there is a will at a governmental, or sometimes it needn't be national, it can be regional. But if there is a will to do something about that, then ultimately it's incentivizing this with a little bit of money, quite frankly. So it's making public funding available, grant funding, in order to extend skills programs, training programs. And that's quite possible within the existing state aid rules that we've got. Just at a headline level, that allows for 50% of those kind of costs to be provided by the state if there is a wish to do so, if the money's to be made available. Certainly, I noticed yesterday in the budget that there was a big announcement. I think it was $2.5 billion or 3 billion or something like that for a national skills fund. And as I understand it, there's not much meat on the bones of how that's going to work, who can apply to it, and how it's all going to flow down. But that's at least positive. I mean, from experience in the past, there were organisations such as the UK Commission for Employment and Skills and various other regional authorities that were announcing grant funding programmes precisely to enable companies and sectors to apply in to say, right, OK, we've got a good idea for how we can go forward and teach our people how to be more productive, because that's ultimately what it's about. And if we can get a bit of public support towards that, then these things work well. And certainly, I know that this is done a lot on the continent, on the European continent. They do lots of regular investment in skills programs for employees of companies.
Thank you very much. Jules, you must have seen that question coming back to you from a mile off. What are your thoughts on that? On the will for investment and to try and kickstart some of this in a way that will make it potentially more feasible for people to upskill and train.
Well, City Halls recently, as from last autumn, took over London's further education budget. That's some now £318 million. And we have set about talking to, before we took it over, a wide range of industries that were vital to London to determine how that would best be spent. It's a kind of a slow tank, slowly moving, turning a tanker really, that we committed not to throw things up in the air and destabilise the further education sector. But our priorities are those areas that we need to backfill, not least because of Brexit. They're the obvious ones, social care and hospitality, but the construction industry is way up there at the top. The Mayor's Construction Academy, as I said, isn't just about coordinating places and opportunities, but also there's a £7 million fund, capital fund, to make better equipment available in settings. That's on top of the £100+ million investments we're making into local colleges. I think the key thing, though, the Construction Academy is doing is the accreditation, though, as well, accrediting industry training to cut through this mistrust that there has been from the industry about what the colleges are turning out. But the announcement in the budget yesterday is welcome if it does translate into an increase in investment in further education. It's been hugely cut over the last decade, and so that needs to be restored.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to stay with you for just a minute because we've got this, this question here about how will improving skills improve then productivity for the UK and within the UK. And I want to ask everybody that question, but it does make sense, I think, to start with you off the back of what you just said. It sounds like an obvious question, actually. If we have better skills, then productivity will, arguably go up. But it would be good to put some meat on the bones of that answer, if that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, the UK is, the productivity has been at its lowest over the last 10 years than any time in the last century. London fares a bit better than that. Its productivity is 32% higher than the average UK. But it's clear that we have got to improve. I think digital skills that we've touched on will do something there. I think, though, that I want to come back, though, to the point about diversity. I think, though, as well, that we've got to do more to reflect. I think someone said it earlier about reflect the communities that we're in. I mean, this industry is creating the spaces in which we in which we all live. It's another well-being issue, and for it not to be, for example, design. Like, take architecture. Only 34% of architects are women. This is now the 21st century, yet we actually haven't got to a point where half the people designing the spaces we live, reflects the makeup of humanity. And I think that's a huge productivity issue. I mean, look at the infrastructure sector, hugely white, male, older. We've set up an infrastructure group at City Hall. It calls together the most senior people within the infrastructure sector and the regulators. But obviously they all look like me. So we've also had, so they meet the mayor. There are discussions, but as I say, it reflects one particular point of view. So so the infrastructure group has also set up an advisory group of younger people, younger professionals in the industry, and that is 70% women and 30% BME. And of course, that's giving a much, a fresher and modern take on what the sector needs to advance, and that has got to probably have as much impact on productivity and preparedness for the future than any amount of specific skills training.
Thank you very much. I'm actually, Gillian, I'm going to come to you next. And off the back of what Jules was just saying, I think what we saw there, talking about technology and talking about some of the changes that are being made, it sort of reflects a renewed excitement. Oh, she's gone again, but I'm sure she'll be back.
I'm here.
Good. Sort of a renewed excitement, I think, in this sector, and we've certainly seen it. We've seen it recently around sustainability, and with the launch of carbon impact funds, and it's starting to feel a bit like people are looking at the real estate sector now more than they ever have done before, and thinking, do you know what? If I go into that sector, I could actually do something pretty amazing, and I might be able to make a real difference. And is that something that you would agree with, and that you recognise, and something that the real estate sector really should be capitalising on at the moment?
I hope so. It certainly feels like it's a position that we should be in. I mean, we were delighted with the PIA 7, can't remember what they're called, investment things that came out last week, and these are the sorts of things we should have been doing an awfully long time ago. It does certainly feel like the discussions with government have changed, and we're no longer having to stand there and leap up and down and announce that we're here. We're now being able to stand there and hand in hand, look at what we need to do to get us to get us all into a better place, whether it be the challenges or the opportunities. Some of that is to do with personality, some of that is to do with that greatly enhanced mandate that they've got. But yes, it certainly feels that there's a real driving force. It's not just central government, it's also local government. We do an awful lot with the combined authorities all around the country, and the LEPs and local authorities individually, but particularly the combined authorities. You get a real sense of drive and a real sense that real estate and the built environment is absolutely at the forefront of their discussions.
Thank you very much. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to Kelly on that same question, and then the video links that we've got are beginning to ever so slightly threaten to fail us. So we're going to come to you, Kelly, and then we've got a few minutes left where I'm going to come to everybody for their final thoughts and what they'd like everybody to sort of leave this broadcast thinking about. But Kelly, as you're in the studio, and I know that we've got the link that is not going to break up, can I just ask you about your thoughts on that potential renewed excitement in the industry and this realisation that actually there's an awful lot of good that can be done through working in real estate and construction?
Absolutely. I think, as Jules said, certainly, reflecting the communities in the places that we're building and managing. And I think there's a real piece around starting to, understand the data. And I think that, will start to bring the connectivity together and bringing, people that are, at planning stage through to, architects, construction, and right through to those that are managing the assets. And then, also the people that are living and, working and playing in these developments. And actually, there's almost a golden thread piece in making sure that we are taking all of that feedback from everybody, understanding the requirements, so that we can be building, futures. Tech moves very, very quickly, and sometimes, the building process isn't as quick. And what we're, in trouble of is, always being one step behind. So I think it's bringing everybody into that loop, everybody into that process. And those different skill sets, I think, is where there's a bit of renewed energy. And, maybe bringing some of the softer skills in as well, people with, customer service backgrounds and, IQ and EQ that start looking at the emotional intelligence of, buildings and people and what they want from a building as opposed to just a roof over their head.
Thank you very much. So we have about 4.5 minutes, which is perfect timing for our final thoughts. So if we could start with you, Jonathan, what is it that you'd like people to leave this or log off from this session with the message in their heads?
Well, I think in terms of the skills agenda, it's as I said before, namely that great if you can find it within your investment priorities to put your your important finite resources into upskilling your workforce for longer term gain, and that's great if everybody can be doing it already, because it's surely the route through to greater productivity. But if that is a difficult assessment to make, then I'd encourage everyone to be looking to their relevant local authorities or regional authorities. Great to hear that such relationships with combined authorities are existing. Certainly, we're advising on these sorts of programs. But working with the public sector can lead to collaborative projects and public sector support towards upskilling. which is ultimately, to the gain of society, not just the individual business, but in particular in the short term, it's to the individual business that's putting its investment alongside that public contribution.
Thank you very much. Caroline, your final thoughts, please.
So the final thing I wanted to raise was that improving skills is clearly going to increase the UK's productivity, but I think it's a lot more than that. It's also about economic inclusion and bringing along people that have been marginalised and left behind. So one of the programmes I'm most proud of that Landsec does is our work with Bounce Back, in prisons across the UK, particularly in London with Brixton Prison, and that's to train offenders on skills that we have a shortage of in the construction sector. So whether that's dry lining, scaffolding, cleaning at heights, and then we find these people employment in our supply chain on release. And I think looking at skills shortages we have, but trying to think out of the box of different ways that we can include people that have previously been excluded from society.
Thank you very much. Ghislaine.
Two things really. I think first that obviously we're not there yet. There's a long way to go. We've all been to numerous events around gender diversity, etc., over the past couple of years. There's still an awfully long way to go, and it's really important we don't just kind of tick the box and move on. The one of the more difficult things often is the challenges around social mobility, and we are nowhere near as a sector getting anywhere on that, and that's really, really challenging as to how to do it. We're trying to learn from other sectors. We're trying to have those conversations with other bodies to try and work out where we best go. But that feels like something that we really need to kind of together and work on.
Thank you very much. Kelly.
It's certainly, I think, about embracing different skills as they come through, and employers looking at not just your traditional educational routes, but vocational, and whether there's other the apprenticeship schemes, and working in those communities and actually trying to bring people through, and knowing that there are other routes into property that are non-traditional, and embracing those different skill sets. And I think that's really key for employers to take forward.
Thank you very much. And finally, Jules.
I'd just like to finish with a plug for the Mayor's Good Growth by Design programme. It's a call to everyone engaged in London's architectural design, built environment professions, construction industry, to help realise good growth in the capital. We got 50 of we've got 50 Mayor's Design advocates, and they're some of the most talented built environment sector professionals in the country, and they've helped us develop this programme and supporting diversity, getting greater diversity across all these industries. And it goes to the heart of, I think, what we've been talking about this morning. It is one of the 6 pillars of the programme. And through this developing this programme, we've created this supporting diversity handbook, which we've published. And I'm pleased to say that REBA have committed to using the handbook as part of its core CPD programme, which is terrific. And the way that it is written is that it's structured around the different stages of an architect's education and career, starting out from school, going all the way to the top. But it includes really sort of practical commitments that companies can adopt about equality, diversity and inclusion training, reviewing their relevant policies, which someone's mentioned earlier today that their company's doing, improving data collection. I mean, that's an absolute starting point, which is amazing how many companies still haven't got good enough data really to be able to even report on some of these issues, and sort of supporting diversity inclusion through procurement as well, which increasingly, the public sector is going to reward contracts with an element of it based on an organisation's diversity and inclusion. And if companies can't even, give the figures as to what their makeup is, that's a real problem. And good practice is going to be rewarded. So Good Growth by Design, it's on the GLA website. Go and check it out.
Thank you very much. And thank you to all of our speakers for joining us today, either in person or via the power of technology and through video calling. If anybody wants to find out more about our take on reskilling and upskilling, particularly around technology, then do check out our tech magazine, which we have put together in partnership with a number of partners, including DWF, and we're looking in there at this new issue of not just having to attract talent, but what happens when your talent decides to go off on their own and set up their own business, and how you support that and encourage that, while also being aware that it could mean that you lose some of your good people. So thanks so much again for everyone for joining me, and I hope everyone's looking forward to the next session, which is coming up in not just a minute, but I think in about half an hour to 45 minutes.